Listen to the words of Revelation chapter 1, verse 3. Revelation chapter 1, verse 3 says, "Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near." As far as I know, this is the only book in the entire Bible that actually pronounces a blessing upon you if you hear and heed what's written. So as we begin this series of lessons on Sunday evening from this book, we realize that every time we come and hear the words of this book and heed them, listen to them, follow them, obey them, God is in some way going to send a blessing upon us. He promises us that. Certainly it's a book that is neglected, probably for many reasons. Certainly takes a lot of time and effort to glean from it what God wants us to get from it. It's overlooked. It's just something that many people will not take the time to look at. But as we go through these lessons, there are certainly some principles understanding that are key. Number one, we can understand the overall message of the book of Revelation without understanding every detail in it. He wants us to understand. He wouldn't have said in Revelation chapter 1 verse 3 that the person is going to be blessed who reads and follows it unless it was possible to read and follow it. He wouldn't give us something that's impossible, some task to do that we were not capable of doing. So it is something we're capable of doing. And certainly I think if there was a key, if you could narrow down, how can I understand Revelation to one key phrase or sentence, it would simply be, to understand it, you have to look at it, as Brother West used to say, through first century glasses. Otherwise, it's incomprehensible. Otherwise, you can dredge up all sorts of bizarre ideas from it. But if every time you open the pages of this book, you put yourself into the shoes of someone living in Ephesus or Smyrna or Pergamum or Philadelphia or Laodicea, then the book certainly comes alive to you in new ways, and it's much easier to follow and understand. And since these are a series of sermons as opposed to a series of class discussions, then we're going to especially focus on how is this going to help me? How is this going to help me? And we want to answer that question every single Sunday evening that we have an opportunity to look at it. There are probably 4 major viewpoints. That's maybe not the best term, but 4 major views of this book. The prominent one, the one believed by most people in the Protestant world and probably many in the Catholic world, goes by different names. Sometimes it's called the futurist view. And basically that view that's held by most of the conservative Protestant faiths believe that Revelation chapter 4 through Revelation chapter 22 is all in the future. Everything in those 19 chapters are in the future. And that nothing in those chapters has happened yet. That's the prominent view of just about the majority of people you're going to talk to about the Revelation believes that. That the only thing that's happened yet happened in Revelation chapters 1 through 3. Those letters that John wrote to the 7 churches. I think there are, as you might imagine, a number of problems with that view. And the biggest problem is it contradicts the key to understanding the book, right? If the key to understanding the book is to put yourself in the shoes of the people who lived in the first century, then the idea of 90% of the book being in the future would be of no benefit to you whatsoever. If you were living in Ephesus, a big town, big city in the first century, and you saw the temples and the shrines and everything in that city, and and you get this letter written from John, and we'll talk about who John is in a minute, about all of these things that's going to happen, and God's wrath being poured out in visions of bowls and false prophets and beasts and dragons and 1,000-year reign and on and on and on. If you were in that person's shoe and told, well, that's going to happen, 2,000 or 3,000 years in the future, you'd say, well, then why write it to me? I don't want to know it. I don't want to hear it if it's not going to help me in the first century. And just about every time you turn on the TV or read something in the paper about all the things in Revelation that's going to happen in the future, never is it mentioned about those people in the first century that read it. It's never mentioned how it would help them and why it was written to them. Because it is specifically written to 7 churches. The book of Colossians was written to Christians living in the city of Colossae. The book of Ephesians, written to Christians living in the city of Ephesus. The book of Revelation, written to Christians living in 7 specific cities in Asia Minor, what today is modern Turkey. It's written to those specific people, and there's no way to get around that. Most of those people in the Protestant world that believe that all of this is yet future claim that they're taking the literal view of Revelation. They're interpreting it like they should. But they never look at it through those first century eyes. That's never mentioned. It's never brought up. Never discussed. And that is the downfall of that viewpoint. Even though tens, if not hundreds of millions of people believe that view, it's certainly false. Another very prominent view, even in the Lord's church, is what's called the preterist view. And if you ever are talking with someone that maybe has gone to school in a particular denominational school, they will probably refer to you, if they know you're in the Church of Christ, they will refer to you as a preterist. Preterist. But it's because they don't know what the word means, apparently. This viewpoint of the book of Revelation says that all of Revelation, all 22 chapters, everything, including the final judgment, standing before the throne, being judged, people going to heaven and hell, has already happened. That's the preterist view. And you'll think, there's surely no people in the world that believe that. Oh, yes, there is. It's very abundant in the Church of Christ. And you think, no way. Oh, yeah, I know people that believe that. It's very popular in certain parts of the country. It was primarily started by a gospel preacher living in Ohio by the name of Max King. Sometimes this viewpoint is called Max Kingism because he started it. Sometimes it's called realized eschatology, has other names. But basically the idea is that essentially everything in the book of Revelation happened before the destruction of Jerusalem, or by the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And those people that follow that in particular believe that, yes, we're either living in heaven or hell right now. Judgment's already happened. This is it. Well, I must not have made it if this is it. I would not want this to be heaven. That's for sure. But yet they believe that, and they're very, very sincere, and that viewpoint has literally gone into congregations of churches of Christ and overtaken the congregation. I can name you countless places where that has happened in the United States. So it's a very real belief. Now, many people in the denominational world will say that the preterist view is simply that most things took place before the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. So those are the kind of the extreme views of the book of Revelation. Practically everything's in the future. Practically everything has already happened. Another, I guess you'd call it, viewpoint that was very popular with many of the restoration leaders, restoration writers. It goes by different names. Sometimes it's called the historical view, the historical approach, and basically that means that Revelation represents kind of a timeline of everything that's happened in our world. All the major events are pictured in the book of Revelation, and all of these things that's happened, including the Dark Ages, and all of those things are pictured in the book of Revelation. Again, I kind of think that if I was in the first century, I'm not sure that would have much meaning to me. So if the key to understanding the book of Revelation is to look at it through first century glasses, then I think the viewpoint that is going to be the most helpful and makes the most sense is the first century viewpoint. Looking at the book of Revelation, all 22 chapters, from the viewpoint of a Christian living in the latter part of the first century. And by taking that viewpoint, you can really mine a lot out of this marvelous book. Revelation's a big part of the New Testament. There's a lot in it. And I think the most you can get out of the book of Revelation comes from the idea of looking at it through first century glasses. Don't we do that with all the other books? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans. We look at all of those books as if we were living in Rome or Ephesus or Colossae or Philippi or places like that. Why do we change that way of looking at the Bible just because we get to the book of Revelation? I don't think we should. So what is the purpose then of this book? Notice at the very beginning of Revelation, Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, we are told some of the reasons. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave Him to show His servants things which must shortly take place. And He sent and signified it by His angel to His servant John, who bore witness to the Word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that He saw. We are given some great insight in those first two verses. First of all, it's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It is not the revelation of John. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. John just was the inspired writer. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. And it's about things, he says, which God gave Him to show His servants, His people, Christians, disciples, things that are going to shortly take place. Some of these things, at least, were going to start to take place very soon. And if you look up the Greek word for shortly there's two different definitions of the same word. Number one, it is things that will all take place shortly. In other words, they'll all come to pass shortly. Number two, they will start to take place shortly. And they're both involved in that word that's translated shortly there. These are shortly going to take place. Then why are there so many misinterpretations of the book of John, or book of Revelation by John? Very simple. Look at the end of verse 1. It says, He sent and signified it by His angel to His servant John. It was signified. And you know what the first four letters of the word signified are. S-I-G-N. Sign. So it was given through signs. And so when things are given in signs, like they were in the books of Daniel and Ezekiel and Zechariah, all kinds of ideas can come forth if people don't look at the entire book by itself or all together. And that, of course, is where many problems can come in. We're told in the very beginning of this that it was sent to His servant John. And so when we look at the book, there's lots of Johns mentioned in the New Testament. Which one is this John? And we certainly don't want to spend a lot of time talking about which John this is, because it's not all that significant. But if you look at the evidence, both external and internal evidence, by that I mean things that are written inside the New Testament itself, comparing words, grammar, syntax that's used by John here and by other epistles that are said to be by John, even the Gospel of John. You'll see a number of similarities, even though the Gospel of John was written for a very different purpose than the revelation given to John. Very, very different. But it seems like all the evidence points to this being John the Apostle. One of those 12 originally chosen by Christ. One of the sons of Zebedee, one of the sons of thunder. One of those original apostles, one that got to see the transfiguration on the mountain. One that was there for Jesus' crucifixion. One that was allowed to write an account of the gospel. One that was allowed to write 3 general epistles to various individuals. Seems to all be the same person. And who is it written to? Revelation chapter 1 verse 4 says it's written to the 7 churches which are in Asia. He names them down in verse 11. Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. Some of these were very well known to Paul, right? Ephesus, Paul started that congregation on one of his missionary journeys. Others of these 7 might have been started by Paul. Paul was very familiar to them. If you look at a map of Asia Minor or Turkey, you'll see these 7 congregations kind of being not in a perfect circle, but in a forming kind of a circular type path. And I think there was probably a reason for that. These were not the only 7 cities in that area. There were others in that area as well. But these were chosen, and probably for a very specific reason. Because when we look at, as we will in the next few weeks, the particular letters written to these 7 congregations, we'll see ourselves kind of embedded in those letters. We will see ourselves as Christians and as congregations in those letters in various ways. We'll see as, hey, we're kind of like the church here or there. Or I've seen that happen in that congregation. Or I was a part of a congregation in which that happened. So while it was written to those 7 congregations specifically, there are things we can learn from every single one of them. Those congregations were suffering terribly. I think there's a great deal of evidence. I think the vast majority of evidence points to the fact that this was the last book written in the New Testament. I think there's a lot of evidence that it was written at least in the last 20 years of the first century. I think it's hard to specify the exact month or year, but certainly toward the end of the first century. And why so? I think there's a lot of arrows that point to the end of the first century. But if we go back in time, remember the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. What happened in AD 70? Well, of course, Judaism in all forms was destroyed, wasn't it? The temple was gone and all the records were gone. The sacrifices were gone. The altars were gone. All of it was destroyed by the Roman army. Even prior to that time, especially in the 60s and even before, Christians had what? They'd spread all over that part of the world, hadn't they? I mean, everywhere. They had, of course, started in Jerusalem, but by the 60s, for sure, they were everywhere. Well, by AD 70, the Jews were dispersed all over the area as well. Some people see the word revelation and think about things that are closed, hidden, covered, thinking that the book has a lot of things that are concealed. But yet the word revelation, when you look at it in the original language, it comes from the word that we get apocalypse from, the Greek word, has the idea of an unveiling, an uncovering, something that's like in a box with a lid on it, And now the lid's taken off, and it's revealed. So instead of Revelation being a great mystery and things that are yet to be revealed and things that are not understandable, it's just the opposite. God chose the word revelation when you see it in the book. So it is an uncovering, it's a revealing, it's an unveiling. And so you see that throughout the entire book, things that are revealed. What does that have to do with Christians living in Pergamum or Laodicea or Philadelphia? What does that have to do with you? Well, when you get this letter and it's read there to your congregation, you're going to hear about things that came from God that's in the form of signs, but signs that you can understand. I mean, if I was a Christian living in Laodicea, I would have understood the book of Revelation. No problem. I would have understood what he was talking about. Otherwise, the book has no meaning. It was meant for those people. And those Christians in the first century would have understood it. And they would have got a lot out of it. And it would have helped them. What's happening at this time in the first century? Again, if you were a Christian living in that part of Asia Minor, in one of those cities, you were going to be persecuted. It didn't make any difference where you were or if you were trying to hide, you would be persecuted. Christians had been persecuted prior to this time, going back to the Emperor Nero. He was probably one of the first ones back in the 60s, even before the destruction of Jerusalem, that started persecuting Christians, and his wasn't near as severe. But going through the next few emperors, like Vespasian and others, they persecuted Christians on and off, up until about AD 81. A new emperor, new Roman emperor, comes on the scene by the name of Domitian, who greatly multiplies the persecution of Christians. Many, many times more persecution than Christians had seen. And he was the emperor for about 15 to 16 years, from the early 80s to the mid-90s. And during that time, it seemed to be his goal to eliminate Christianity, to kill every Christian he could find, to have them persecuted in every way imaginable. That seems to be the context in which the book is being received by Christians who are suffering endlessly, who are persecuted right and left by these Roman emperors and their guard, I guess is what you would call it. They were called many different things. By this time there had become what many historians called an imperial cult. And basically what this imperial cult did was try to go around and enforce emperor worship. Now, emperors going all the way back to Nero wanted to be worshipped and had done things to try and cause people to worship them, but it was Domitian who really forced emperor worship. This imperial cult. They had built temples, shrines, whatever you want to call them, in some of these 7 cities. And I think, again, that's why these 7 cities were picked out. Because in some of them, they had actually built these shrines, or whatever you want to call them, to Domitian. People would be forced to worship a man. And of course, you see the dilemma that Christians of the first century would be up against. These people from this imperial cult going around and trying to force them to bow down and worship a man. And they knew the Bible said, no, you can't. So the conflict, both internal and external, to the Christians in Laodicea and Philadelphia and Pergamum would be immense. Because their problems, as far as living in the world, would be solved if all they did was bow down to the emperor, or the image of the emperor. But if they didn't, this imperial cult, these people could have them killed. And of course, many were in some really awful, awful ways. So this was a great threat to Christians in the first century. And with that in mind, so much of the book just kind of fits in place. You know, if you think that all of Revelation basically is still yet to come, it's like a whole bunch of pieces of a puzzle that just don't fit. Have you ever tried to put a puzzle together and you try to get a piece and fit it into a place it looks like it should fit, and you try and force it in there, and you realize after a while, it ain't going to work. It's not going to fit. And that's why you see so many people today trying to take these pieces of Revelation and fit them into a puzzle. Why? Because it keeps changing. They'll say, well, this over here represents this part of Revelation. Well, when that doesn't come to pass or whatever, then they have to put the pieces of the puzzle back together again. And they have to keep changing it. But it's because their whole entire viewpoint of what's going on in Revelation is skewed. And so their puzzle pieces will never fit because their whole picture is wrong. All they have to do is go back and look at it through the eyes of Christians in the first century, and things will change. So this was a great, great threat. Every day, these people, especially in this part, this seemed to be the very worst part of the persecution. Those 7 cities, that part of Asia Minor, that seemed to be where it was the worst. You'd think it'd be the worst in Rome. It wasn't. The worst was in this area. And again, that seems to point to God's divine providence in looking at these particular cities, because they were being persecuted greatly. So that's really the purpose of the book. Listen to the words of Revelation chapter 1, verse 3. Revelation chapter 1, verse 3 says, "Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near." As far as I know, this is the only book in the entire Bible that actually pronounces a blessing upon you if you hear and heed what's written. So as we begin this series of lessons on Sunday evening from this book, we realize that every time we come and hear the words of this book and heed them, listen to them, follow them, obey them, God is in some way going to send a blessing upon us. He promises us that. Certainly it's a book that is neglected, probably for many reasons. It certainly takes a lot of time and effort to glean from it what God wants us to get from it. It's overlooked. It's just something that many people will not take the time to look at. But as we go through these lessons, there are certainly some principles understanding that are key. Number one, we can understand the overall message of the book of Revelation without understanding every detail in it. He wants us to understand. He wouldn't have said in Revelation chapter 1 verse 3 that the person is going to be blessed who reads and follows it unless it was possible to read and follow it. He wouldn't give us something that's impossible, some task to do that we were not capable of doing. So it is something we're capable of doing. And certainly I think if there was a key, if you could narrow down, how can I understand Revelation to one key phrase or sentence, it would simply be, to understand it, you have to look at it, as Brother West used to say, through first century glasses. Otherwise, it's incomprehensible. Otherwise, you can dredge up all sorts of bizarre ideas from it. But if every time you open the pages of this book, you put yourself into the shoes of someone living in Ephesus or Smyrna or Pergamum or Philadelphia or Laodicea, then the book certainly comes alive to you in new ways, and it's much easier to follow and understand. And since these are a series of sermons as opposed to a series of class discussions, then we're going to especially focus on how is this going to help me? How is this going to help me? And we want to answer that question every single Sunday evening that we have an opportunity to look at it. There are probably 4 major viewpoints. That's maybe not the best term, but 4 major views of this book. The prominent one, the one believed by most people in the Protestant world and probably many in the Catholic world, is goes by different names. Sometimes it's called the futurist view. And basically that view that's held by most of the conservative Protestant faiths believe that Revelation chapter 4 through Revelation chapter 22 is all in the future. Everything in those 19 chapters are in the future. And that nothing in those chapters has happened yet. That's the prominent view of just about the majority of people you're going to talk to about the Revelation believes that. That the only thing that's happened yet happened in Revelation chapters 1 through 3. Those letters that John wrote to the 7 churches. I think there are, as you might imagine, a number of problems with that view. And the biggest problem is it contradicts the key